Forget about where your tongue is. Just keep it where it is. That's if you can get to that point, awesome. If you're not, and it's like, oh, I feel like the gap and it feels stressful, well, then that's when you can take the tongue off the roof of your mouth. But that might be a clue you have a tongue tie. It also just might be a clue that you have some areas that need to be loosened by a skilled body worker.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am very excited to have an expert in a topic, an area, a field that we have not yet discussed on this podcast. And his name is Dr. Neel Bulchandani. He is an integrative specialist, creator of a fusion system called Embryoloji, where he synthesizes many fields and modalities to comprehensively investigate and unlock body pain, tension, and dysfunction. He's a chiropractor, a bodyworker, a movement teacher, a podcast, and a philosopher. He works in person and virtually and has created online courses for both practitioners and patients. And he also is teaching his floor of the mouth protocol, which I'm so excited to get into today. He's teaching that across the country this year with an ongoing training, floor of the mouth tour, Los Angeles, spanning the year in 4 separate modules. Neel, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me, Talor. It's really exciting to be with you, and I've enjoyed your podcast, so it's cool to be here talking to you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I heard you on the podcast of a mutual friend of ours, and he was absolutely raving about things that you did. You know, you did some kind of work inside of his mouth that all of a sudden relieved tension in his legs and other part of his body, and did all sorts of things like that. So before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's kind of start with a little bit of a brief background. What's the story here? How did you get into the work that you're doing today?
I think the seed of it was, growing up as the son of a cardiologist, he was always looking for like non-invasive, gentle ways to help people heal. He was a investigator and he's like a detective. So I think I learned that part. Although growing up in, the hospitals, just roaming around, watching him, I was like, I didn't think that I was going to pursue that. But so, fast forward after getting a degree in molecular biology, working as a chemist for a little bit, not really loving any of those things as career. I always felt like I was more in the expressive arts and creativity. But I ended up, my brother got hurt, younger brother, somebody helped him a lot, and that was a chiropractor. That made me curious. I didn't even know it existed at this point. And I'm, at that point, like 25 years old. Now I'm 44, about to turn 45 this month. And so the guy who helped my brother significantly was a chiropractor. And when I went in to kind of skeptically kind of investigate it, it helped me dramatically with my asthma. So like 3 months later, I was starting chiropractic college in Davenport, Iowa. And that's when I dove in and, so then practiced, learned, and studied under many greats. And but that was, chiropractic. When I graduated chiropractic college in 2008 and then started working, I started to explore digging into those problem areas, concussions, and helping people by delving into fascia and working on soft tissue and releasing organs and working on cranial bones. None of that was in my training, although some chiropractors do learn that, but I was delving into these areas intuitively. But it was then like my daughter, married and have 3 wonderful kids. And then when my oldest was born, in 2016, I had already been practicing for, over 8 years. And she was born with a tongue tie, and that's when the tongue has a inability to move as well due to extra and rigid tissue under the tongue. And our midwife spotted it, told us about it. I had no idea that existed. And then I began this journey of like working on her little precious body, days old, to help her, and started to, explore more about how to help her with the issues that she was having with feeding and just even staying regulated and not crying all the time. There's a longer journey with that, but I would say that was really the beginning of this deeper work, was learning from what helped and didn't help her. And from there, it was like, wow, there's so much more. When I saw these little babies, kids, adults come in, I started to explore the mouth on all of my patients and make it a standard in a protocol. And that's where I kind of arrived at what I do now, is poring over the data and seeing what worked and didn't work.
Amazing, amazing. And yeah, tongue ties. So this is something, if our listeners, you may not have heard about this before. I've listened to, gosh, probably thousands of hours of health podcasts in my lifetime. And maybe a couple times I've heard this even mentioned. How common is a tongue tie? And what are some of the, I know it can cause issues with breathing and not being able to nose breathe correctly, but tell us a little bit about how common are tongue ties and what are some of the issues that people, maybe someone's listening right now, they have a tongue tie and they don't even know it and they're having some side effects from it.
Yeah, and I have collaborate with some of these amazing providers out there that are forerunning in this field, and of course, Stanford Medicine. We owe them a lot. I travel to the Bay Area monthly. I'm in California, and I work in the Bay Area monthly. And there's a lot of amazing airway-centered providers who have done so much for the field, and I ride on the shoulders of those giants. And I collaborate with those like Dr. Sarush Zaghi out of the Breathe Institute in LA, and just too many to include. Dr. Movahead in the Bay Area, and there's so many that have pushed out there the information of what is a tongue tie. So a tongue tie is when tissue under the tongue, called the frenulum, when there is too much tissue and it is too tight. You can also have a lip tie. You can have cheek ties. There's 7 frena in our mouths. Everybody can have 7. You should have 7 frena. It's plural of frenum. And the question is, are they tied or restricted or tethered? That's a complicated kind of evaluation process, but for the most part, we talk about the tongue because it's the most obvious. And when it's there, it provides a lot of restriction in some simple things like breathing, like you mentioned, and sleep quality. But for a baby, we talk about the tongue has to move up to get that milk, whether they're breastfeeding or bottle feeding. And if it doesn't move up properly, they can't have enough pressure and extract enough. So sometimes we see failure to thrive happening because of a tongue tie. And there's also issues where if the tongue can't get to the roof of the mouth for breathing, well, then it causes stuffiness, congestion, and interrupted sleep. And then also it can cause rigidity through the entire body. Of course, we can talk about speech issues. We can talk about issues with digestion. But yeah, when there is a tongue tie, or I would say other ties, or narrow maxilla, narrow palate, and there's a whole other range of issues, these can all start in utero at that 4th, 5th week gestation. And so this is happening in the womb. And so by the time a baby's born, after all this time of having these ties here, and the fascia and the connective tissue in the entire body can be so tense because the body has to compensate for the lack of movement here by recruiting movement elsewhere. These babies can be born rigid. And so then often the adults that I see, that if they have these issues, they're like, I've been tight my whole life, tight hamstrings, tight traps. I have that forward head posture. And, sometimes we blame text, neck and all that sitting on it. But a lot of times they've been underdiagnosed or not diagnosed for their tongue tie. And so we can have not only things like that, we can have TMJ, we can have, problems with, like I said, digestion. I see like a lot of people that have had hernias, like hiatal hernias, where they have this rigidity in their stomach and the diaphragm and the stomach compressed together. There's so often a tongue tie at the root of that. So we could just say that it could be at the root of so many issues. Now, there used to be a stat that said 2% was the prevalence of tongue tie. But I think those of us in the field know that was way underreported. And there is a big difference between an anterior tongue tie and a posterior mid tongue tie. Let's just say when the frenum is all the way to the tip of the tongue, and you see somebody's tongue and they can't even lift the tongue without you seeing that big string under the tongue. That's an anterior. When it's posterior, the frenum is restricted, like hit this way or this way to that depth, not all the way to here. Those are really hard to spot and sometimes fly under the radar. So there's a lot more evidence that pointed at 10% a few years ago, but those of us are really seeing something like 60%, I would say, is what the percentage is.
60%,
Yeah,
you think?
way more.
Wow.
And I would
I
say,
mean, everything you described, I felt you were talking about me. You're like tight traps.
right?
I used to have TMJ. I don't
Uh huh.
anymore, which is a great thing. But I used to struggle with that. I had tight traps. I've had tight hamstrings, and I'm thinking, uh-oh, shoot. I mean, and the thing is, like you said, yeah, 2% is what the reported is. Who even looks for this stuff? There's such a small amount of chiropractors or doctors or anyone.
Sure.
I've never heard a doctor talk about a
Yeah.
tongue tie or look for it or suspect it, right?
Yeah, and a lot of props to Marjan Jones in Australia, and Dr. Baxter out there in Alabama. These are pediatric dentists. The dentists, and there's ENTs like Sarush Sagi. They've been putting out research, and been helping so many patients with this. But and it's not yet at that mainstream, but it is growing in its awareness. And we're also fighting this issue where traditional medicine can say it's being overdiagnosed, and they can say it's not really a problem. And I can't tell you how many patients of mine have been gaslit, especially moms, by people saying, no, 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 it's not an issue. And it's like, well, when the baby fails to thrive, and like they do go to somebody who can recognize this, thank God, right? So there's a lot of amazing lactation consultants and myofunctional therapists are two experts in the field that are really spotting this as well. And so really it becomes, who do these families, if there's we're talking about babies, who do they come across and who comes across them? But yeah, then there's all these people who have maybe not so overt or obvious ties, restrictions that are, there, and maybe they're not creating a ton of issues, but they are impairing function. And I could just think of, so many patients that, when we figured this out together, and when I said, oh my gosh, I'm so aware now that all these symptoms, and and I can just talk about so many of them, the reason that you're not holding alignment, the reason that I keep needing to work on these areas, the reason that we're not moving a dial is because you have these oral restrictions or this narrow maxilla. So, I do think that there is a lot more coming out in the field to talk about this. And, more people are spotting this, and more people are knowing, okay, who do I refer to who knows more about that? And by now I'm a specialist in the field that this is the majority of who I see is people who, of course, come to me because they know I do this now, but they've seen these other providers that I mentioned, and they're being sent to me to work on that. So, but before I became a specialist, I went over my data and over again, and I was like, wow, I'm just seeing this so much. And I started to identify patterns, like 70 areas in the body. When there is a tongue tie or narrow palate, these 70 areas can be affected. And I'm talking about like misaligned joints or bones, tight muscles and fascia, and misaligned organs. And so I created a map of this, and it's called an airway map. And that map I'm using not only for myself when I'm spotting somebody's issues, and I'm like, oh, you don't have an obvious tongue tie, but this and this and this and this and this is going on. And oh yeah, when I test your tongue in these additional 4 ways of evaluating for tongue tie, you do have it. So it's not that simple to evaluate also. And I see so many people are coming in and they're like, I've been told by 4 different providers that I don't have a tongue tie. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but I see it. And then they go to somebody else who's, we're working together in this, who's got more knowledge, and they're like, oh yeah, that's been at the root of all these things this whole time. So it can become an exhaustive thing. And I can say that the look of validation on someone's face when they've been to many people and told no, 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 and they're told yes, and it does explain it, and it does help them, and we can move them further into healing. That's one of the things I'm most grateful for, is not telling somebody they have a problem, but saying, here's the problem, but we have some answers and we can do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now, just to be clear, a tongue tie doesn't necessarily mean something's tied up back there.
Correct.
Necessarily. It just it's just a term for tight, some sort of tightness that's restricting the movement in the tongue, and maybe not allowing. We definitely want to get into talking about the right way to breathe and having the tongue, where the tongue should be placed and things like that. But so the tongue tie is not necessarily something actually tied. It's just tightness. And so maybe you can just clarify on that. And then also, how can someone, let's say someone listening now suspects, hey, maybe I have a tongue tie. Is there sort of like a thing? Can you do a test on yourself and say, hey, can I touch this part of my mouth or figure that out, or do you have to go to a specialist to kind of figure it out?
Yeah, no, I'll totally explain that, and there's a few levels of that we can always even do a little simple screening. But I think that what the tongue tie, and that's why we can say tethered oral tissue is the fancy word. Ankylosglossia is the other word for tongue tie, but a tie doesn't mean a knot, right? It means that tissue is too taut and too tense, and there is too much tissue. I'll show you, I have a posterior mid tongue tie, and that's when I do lingual palatal suction, when you get the whole tongue to the roof of the mouth and keep your tongue up there, then open your mouth. Then you can see how much of your tongue stays. There you go. You're doing it, right? And you have compensation of muscles on the floor of your mouth, right? So we can see the muscles beneath the tongue and next to the frenum. If they have to elevate a lot, that is one potential sign of a tongue tie. The other signs would be, we've been taught just, can you stick your tongue out of your mouth? That does not show us if we have a tongue tie. It's more about how easily does the tongue elevate to the roof of the mouth, and not only the front of the tongue, but the back of the tongue. So lingual palatal suction, what I just showed you, and what you did, is a good way to do a screening for that. Then there's something that Dr. Zaghi over at the Breathe Institute developed, which is called floor of mouth hold. You may not want to do this, but you can put your tongue right in front of the frenum on the floor of the mouth, and with your finger putting pressure down in front of and underneath the tongue, try to lift your tongue then. And if you have a lot of trouble lifting your tongue when your finger's on the floor of your mouth, that's another sign you have a tongue tie, because it limits the ability for your muscles to raise with the tongue, because ideally we call this dissociation. The tongue should be able to dissociate from the floor of the mouth with ease. It should be able to lift up, and the muscles and fascia under the tongue should be loose enough that it'll allow it, and the frenum should be elastic enough that it should be able to lift. I'll mention one more thing. Somebody's like, well, what is all these, what does all this mean? What is the terminology here? Fascia is connective tissue, and there's so much to say about that. Then the frenum is actually fascia, but it's made of collagen type 2 fibers. The rest of our fascia in the body is made of collagen type 1 fiber. Collagen 1 is supple, elastic, or at least it can flex, and you can release it and you can loosen it. A frenum, these collagen type 2 bands, you can't really loosen it. So you can work around it and work on other areas. But for the most part, it is really difficult or rare to actually be able to make it more supple. So that's what I'd say is the distinguishing here, is that tissue is fascia, but it is so rigid and restricted. And we can see then and infer that, yeah, in utero that happened. So I'll mention one more thing. When a tongue tie occurs, it's part of development. And I don't know if you know this fact, but when, the egg that made you, right, was from your mom, but the egg that made you was formed not when your mom was pregnant or just before. It was made when your mom was in her mom's womb, right? So it goes back pretty far. So there are things in motion way back that precipitate a tongue tie or lip tie or cheek ties. So at 4 to 5 weeks, the ties are there, and there is a process at 11, 12 weeks gestation where there is a potential for those ties to dissolve. And genetically, we're made to have that happen. When it doesn't happen, we're left with the ties. So we could just say that that's when the demarcating line is at that 11, 12 weeks. If we're release them, we're good. We don't have these tongue ties. We don't have these issues. But if we're left with them, we're born with them. And they definitely can influence the whole body. And like you mentioned, getting into talking about how does that influence breathing? How does that influence sleep? How does that influence feeding and digestion? There's a lot to say about that.
Yeah, I would love to jump into that. Like, what is because actually, in fact, like I've always been very conscious of breathing through my nose for the past, ever since I read a bunch of the books, Oxygen Advantage and Breathe by James Nestor, whatever. And it was like, okay, all right, long story short, 400-page book, breathe through your nose, right?
Yeah.
Like, but there's a little more to it too, right? And now I've been hearing more like, oh, someone told me this the other day, like, oh, your tongue's supposed to be on the roof of your mouth when you're breathing, right? And I was like, yeah. I was like, do I do that? I don't know. So tell us, what is the proper way to breathe? Where should your tongue be resting, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, for breathing, the entire tongue is ideally going to be on the roof of your mouth, right? So some people put the tip of their tongue up there, like on the N spot, as myofunctional therapists would say. Like when you say the letter N, that's the spot. And that is one area your tongue
Hmm.
needs to go to, but that's just the tip of the tongue. Ideally, the whole tongue is going to be up on the roof so that your tongue is making contact with the whole roof, which is the hard palate, which is the maxilla on the front and the palatine bones on the back. What that does is it sets in motion nasal breathing. And we could also say that the roof of the mouth is the floor of the nose, and when the tongue gets that suction up there on the roof, and it creates this seal, and that sets in motion the nasal response, which then we can intake air in through those nostrils more easily. So, some people have deviated septum. They also have like turbinates or concha. That's the same part of our nostril, but two different ways to say those bones. Those nostril bones could be misaligned or huge or not allowing airflow. So some people have issues there. So they can mouth tape, and it's not the answer, right? Because if they're mouth taping and they can't get air in through those compromised nasal pathways, they need other help, right? So what's amazing is that sometimes the soft palate, which is behind the hard palate, and it's a muscle group, if that's loosened or you're led through exercises that can help that can actually open up some of that nasal congestion. I know Dr. Patrick McCune, Oxygen Advantage. I know he was on your podcast, and I love, he's been educating the field for so long on that if you challenge your nasal passageways, sometimes they work so well and we can get that to happen. But I do pretty nuanced work to do intranasal work to free up those restrictions and release those bones when they're too tense, or I work in the soft palate to loosen that so that people can breathe through their nostrils. Because if you do, then, Patrick would do better. He talks a lot about this, but you'd be able to humidify the air properly. The cilia in our nostrils are designed to also filter the air so that it ends up clean when we intake it, versus our mouth, which is not designed to intake air, so it doesn't have a filtration process. So then the air around us, which can be not so great, even if we're dealing with stale indoor air, or if we're not too far away here, the LA fires or any other areas, those areas, like you can take in air through the mouth and you end up more toxic, versus the nostrils can filter and cleanse that air, so you can end up being nourished by that oxygen instead of affected by the toxins that can come along with it.
Yeah, yeah. So you were saying that when you say like the silica in the nose filters the
Cilia.
oxygen coming in, so that's basically nose hairs, right?
Yeah, nose hairs.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. And so actually, this is a kind of an odd thing to talk about,
Sure.
but like on one hand, I don't want long nose hairs
Right.
coming out of my nose.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I remember I saw someone one time literally completely wax and pull out all of the nose hairs, and I was like, I don't think that's the right method. So I'm all for using a nose trimmer along the outside and trimming any nose hairs that may be obnoxiously sticking out of your nose and causing people to stare at you. But on the other hand, I'm very aware when I do have a little nose hair trimmer that I use occasionally, but I'm very aware of like, hey, don't go too deep with this
Yeah.
thing
Right.
because I need these hairs, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. And I think there's a kind of an analog here with the inner ear or the ear, right? So some people, I had a professor of neuroanatomy, Dr. Schmidl, awesome, and he was a legend. But he's like, never, never, never remove the wax from your ears, even if it's like pouring out of your ears, because we're meant to have it. And I'm like, yes, however, like there's a healthy balance and homeostasis, and so it's okay, right? Maybe you don't jam a Q-tip in your ear. That's obviously not a phenomenal idea, but you can remove the excess. So I do think there's an analog with nose hair, like you're talking about. There's like a balance to it. We don't need like a forest growing out of our nostrils in order to cleanse and purify the air. But yeah, at the same time, if you wax that and strip it out, like yeah, I mean, definitely can affect that.
Yeah, well, let me hear the earwax thing. Tell us a little bit more about that. I don't think that's something myself or many others have heard very often as well. So, and yes, I mean, look, I'm guilty. I use a Q-tip. I remember years
Which
ago, a buddy of mine, who though he went to, we were overseas. We were like in Greece on like a vacation, and he had to go to an ear doctor. And the ear doctor, pulled this, something. He had a huge blockage or something going on there, and the ear doctor's like, "Do you stick Q-tips?" Like, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I go all the way deep in there." And you're basically pushing the. He was pushing. He basically clogged up his own ear with a Q-tip by pushing things in there. But tell us a little bit about that. So, So I'm kind of trying to be aware of like, okay, go around the outsides of the ear, but don't jam the Q-tip deep into your ear. What is the proper way for us to use a Q-tip and or clean the ear?
so first of all, I am not an expert in earwax removal, but so that's my disclaimer. Nor am I an ENT, although Dr. Zaghi, and I am like sometimes I feel like a holistic version of that. But no, it's. But I would say just something to keep in mind would be the wax is actually a healthy acoustic media for transmission of sound, also for keeping toxins from entering in when we have an inundated, highly toxic area. So we need some wax. But yeah, I think it's also a good practice to kind of keep some hygiene. And like you said, you can go around the areas. And I've had the experience too, where I was trying to get earwax out and then I jammed, like a pencil eraser type size one. So I had to go to the doctor and get it removed. So I think there's a definitely a healthy kind of amount. I think just gentle removal is good. And some people, get it warm, and so some people use ear candles too. And that's obviously a more involved way to do it. And that can be easy and difficult for some, depending on how comfortable you are with, a fire near your ear. So, but if you get a warm compress, put it on your ear, and that way you kind of soften the earwax, and then you get a Q-tip and just dab it, and you go just slightly into the canal, like not past the periphery, you're going to get a lot of the wax that you need out of there. Some people are worried about, well, I think something to think about though is I have a lot of people come in for hearing issues or inner ear issues, and some people who have like, plugged ear, and it's a really, really nuanced thing to try to problem solve. I mean, sometimes it's the 10th thoracic vertebra and you adjust that and the ear opens up because of the connections in the sympathetic nervous system. But there's other times I have to adjust the ear. And there's yet other times where, I have to work on the soft palate and stretch the ear, and then the ear canal opens up. Or other times it's a parasite that we have to help them remove. There's a lot of things that can affect like normal ear and earwax production. But I would say, like, for sure, when somebody's trying to maintain that proper like balance of like, what do we, because I think some, maybe I'll bring us back to like the tongue and the floor of the mouth and some of that. It's like we can go crazy if we start to be meticulous and scrutinize over how does my tongue move and how does. So I think though we're growing an awareness of how to help people with like when there's a problem. Yes, here's some answers, but it's also good to just be like, I think people have been doing okay for a long time, yet we're in an era where we have more stressors, more, we as people have more stress and more, let's just say environmental toxins. So I think we have knowledge and enlightenment that we can do simple practices to help out. I mean, so yeah, so I'm a big fan of just, not being too militant and saying never do this or do tons of this. And so when I teach people about, how do they, help their mouth and their tongue, and how do they have proper tongue movement to allow for good sleep, to allow for good posture, to allow for good, all the practices we're talking about. I often say to people, like, just try it once. And if you feel good with it, maybe try it another time. And if it feels amazing, do it a third time. But, and then like, can I do it too much? I'm like, yeah, you can. Because if you work on muscles and they're overworked, you might actually aggravate and agitate something. So I kind of went on a rabbit hole away from the ear, but I think it all relates. So I
Yeah.
I think there's like another cool thing about the ear that I like to. I started working on ears specifically back in this would have been 2010, and I started adjusting ears, and this one woman comes to mind, and she's like 70 years old. She comes into the office. I'm adjusting her for like 2 months, like maybe once a week, and I'm not seeing huge progress because she tells me like the third or fourth time she says, you know, uh, she tells me she has vertigo, dizziness, and I didn't think it was a big deal. She didn't really make too much about it, so I thought maybe it's minimal. But anyways, I think it was like the second month she came in, and I was like, "Oh, I didn't check the ear." So I got the ear, and I let her know I was going to do this, and I pulled, and I went, and released the ear, which allowed gas to release really fast. That's a sound. The sound of an adjustment is when gas leaves the body really fast when you make a quick movement, and it's the air that we're mostly made of escaping the joint. So
Hmm.
after that, she felt different. The next time she came in jumping for joy, praising the Lord, because she said for 34 years since the birth of her daughter, she would wake up and she would be dizzy for 15 minutes. The room would spin and she would vomit. For 34 years, every morning,
Wow.
this was happening. After that ear adjustment, no more. And it stopped. And she was like, so ever since then, I now, just like I said, I've been checking the mouth on everybody. Ever since then, I've been checking ear misalignments on every single person who comes in, especially if they got vertigo, if they have ringing in their ears, or if they're just having trouble hearing. Or if you have ears, I'm going to check them, just like if you have a tongue.
Amazing, amazing. So, kind of circling back to close the loop on breathing real quick. So, we said ideally your entire tongue would be touching the roof of your mouth. And then you kind of mentioned, so there are exercises then that you kind of do in some of your trainings, or you teach people how to do certain exercises to get better if they're not doing well with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'm gonna give the proper nod and props to myofunctional. Have you heard of myofunctional therapists? They're also called
I think so.
orofacial
Hmm.
myologists, and
Yes.
and, and
Uh-huh.
I collaborate with so many across the world that are brilliant, and they are like experts in this field. In fact, their field was born out of an awareness of and a proper identification of tongue tie. No other field has come out of that. All of us in these other fields, we've come to learn it and understand it and become good at handling it. But a myofunctional therapist was arose out of the need to address these issues. So there's Barbara Green down in Ventura, half an hour away. She's 83 years old and still practicing, and I collaborate with her. And there's Joy Moeller. She was in the Pacific Palisades until the fires rerouted her to San Diego, and she's like 72, and I collaborate with her. She's still practicing. And they're the ones who've been practicing myofunctional therapy for the longest in the world. And so they have tons of exercises. They are the experts at teaching people how to do. They're like the physical therapist for the mouth, but more. So give them the proper nod. But then I've developed some that are more specific to my understanding of how to work in the mouth and work on the body, and not only that, but work in the entire system of the body to create change. So I, it's kind of, I'll walk you through a quick little exercise here, and that will maybe be like cool for people to do. And so first of all, we're going to start off with here's what you do with your tongue. And then after that, we'll go into like a 1 minute mindfulness activity that I really love showing people, because we need our nervous systems to regulate so we don't get all stressed out by moving our tongue ways that if people have tongue tie, it's going to be hard for them to do. So first of all,
Great.
uh,
And remember, a lot of people are listening via audio, so try to,
totally.
if you can, try to explain it without looking. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. No, I'm a big fan. Yeah, so yeah, first of all, everybody can put their tongues to the roof of their mouth, and sometimes you don't know if it's up there, or just make this sound. And if you're doing a hollow, try to get the back of your tongue up there and create seal or suction and go. That's it. Make that sound. Good. Now get your tongue up there, put it all the way up there, close your mouth, because it's a lot easier to get your tongue to the roof of the mouth if your mouth is closed. So put your tongue up there and try to get the back of it up there. An extra emphasis. Some of you might have to like close your eyes and do this. Good. Now take a deep breath in through your
And
nostrils.
and just some clarification for myself. I've had a bit of an overbite over the years. I had
Yes.
braces. I had teeth removed and braces filling gaps and overbites and you name it. So when I'm keeping this tongue on the roof of my mouth, essentially my teeth should be kind of like jaw should be in a relaxed, closed position with essentially the teeth touching, right? Because I notice like, oh yeah, I got my tongue on the roof, but then it's like, oh wait, my teeth are separated right now.
Yeah. This is a good point. And so, yeah, there's so much to that. And so I would say, and that's one of the things I navigate with people a lot is like, oh, you might have like crowding of your teeth and the bite could be off. And these are really particular problems that we would identify and address very meticulously. So those are all good points. And I would say for now, if your tongue's up on the roof of the mouth and you can close your mouth and then you can then just kind of help your body just kind of forget about where your teeth are, forget about where your tongue is, just keep it where it is. That's if you can get to that point, awesome. If you're not and it's like, oh, I feel like the gap and it feels stressful, well then that's when you can take the tongue off the roof of your mouth, but that might be a clue you have a tongue tie. It also just might be a clue that you have some areas that need to be loosened by a skilled body worker. So when you have your tongue up there on the roof of the mouth, you keep it up there, creating that seal, and then lingual palatal suction, which I already showed you. You open your mouth and you keep your tongue up there. And when you keep your tongue up there and open your mouth, you're getting a really good stretch of your tongue, of the floor of your mouth. You might feel it in your jaw. You might even tip your head back and feel it in the front of your neck. If you're driving, don't do that, right? Do this when you're not driving, right? But you can also then even do one more thing is get in that lingual palatal suction where your tongue's to the roof of the mouth and you open your mouth and then you tip your head to the right and the left. Mm-hmm. And then you can keep your tongue up there and turn to your right and your left, rotating your head. And you might notice, hey, that feels normal. Well, then do it once without your tongue doing in that position where you normally have it, which is your tongue might be to the roof, and see if it's easier for you. So that might be one clue you have fascial tension associated with tongue tie, or at least orofacial tension. But another one to do is you can actually here's the mindfulness version. So is it okay to do like a minute of walking people through this?
Please,
Okay,
yeah.
it's called floor of mouth meditation. Normally, I teach this in my floor of the mouth course or tongue press, which is my other course, or when I'm on podcasts. Sometimes I've really just loved this. So I want to have everybody like for a moment, kind of be aware of where you're sitting, and we're going to get oriented and kind of feel where your feet are. If you've got your feet on the ground, just kind of be aware of where your feet are. If they're in shoes, be aware of your feet touching the shoes. And then I want to have you just kind of take a moment and we're going to do some of this with eyes closed if you're up for that. You can also keep your eyes open. And if you're driving, of course, do not close your eyes. And you can do this either way. So I'm going to have you go ahead and I want to have you take the tip of your tongue and I want to have you trace the entire roof of your mouth like a paintbrush. Take the tip of your tongue and go from front to back. And you could go from the left side of the palate, from the back to the front, front to the back, over to the right, and just cover all the surface area and use the tip of your tongue. Now, when you're doing this, you're going to get some good movement in the tongue, but you're also going to be mapping the palate, mapping the roof of your mouth. You can start from the back and go all the way to the teeth, and then left to right, starting from the front and go all the way to the back. Kind of get used to that terrain if you haven't done this before. Now you're going to take the tip of your tongue and you're going to go to the floor of your mouth and maybe start in the front inside your teeth. Trace the perimeter of your lower jaw, your mandible. And if you can, push the tip of your tongue down into the floor of your mouth, like to massage it. And if it's restricted, if you have a tongue tie, it might be really hard for you to do this, but just explore. This is not about accomplishment. This is about getting used to the terrain. So you're going to move your tongue left and right, right and left, back and forward on the floor of your mouth. Okay. But now I want you to close your eyes if you can, and be aware of where your feet are touching the ground again. And we're going to do a little bit of back and forth. What part of your feet are touching the ground? The balls of your feet, the heels, if you're resting on a little stand of a chair or anything like that, it's okay. Just be aware of where your feet are touching the ground. If they're not, try to get them to where you can. If you're standing, just be aware of that too. You can feel your feet touching the ground. Feel how your weight is distributed. Notice that left and right feet. What's different about each of them, where they're touching. But now I want you to direct your awareness up to your tongue. Put your tongue on the roof of the mouth if it's not out there already. Deep breath in through the nostrils and out through the nostrils if you can. Good. Another breath. Sort of move your shoulders back if they're forward. Right? Feel your face just kind of perhaps loosen or become more aware of your lip muscles. Just kind of tune into your face, tune into your body. So I want to now have you travel back down with your mind to your feet. Feel where they're touching the ground. Now the difference here is I want you to focus on your feet. Keep your awareness on your feet. And don't lose sight of your feet. If you have to visualize your feet, do that. If you have to look down at your feet, look down at your feet. And then now I want you to put the tip of your tongue on the floor of your mouth and massage the floor of your mouth with your tip of your tongue. Keep your focus on your feet. Think about your feet. Now, all of a sudden, I want you to think about your tongue. And put your tongue on the roof of your mouth. Now, just be thankful that you have your tongue on the roof of your mouth, if it's there. And just kind of feel the effect that you might be feeling right now by these practices. Take a deep breath if you can. And just let your feet and your tongue rest where they want to. Okay. Go ahead and open your eyes. Very simple, but it's a tuning in. And some people might feel like, you become more aware of some areas in your body. And you also might just feel a little bit of relaxation, a little bit of that vagal tone shift. How about you? How'd you feel after that?
Yeah, I definitely felt some of the relaxation. But what was amazing was like, oh, wow, I have actually never really felt the bottom of my mouth.
Yeah.
Like I literally was like, going around with the tip of my tongue around the bottom of my mouth. And it's like, I've never done this before. I've never felt this part of my mouth before. And so that in it of itself is quite interesting. I do notice like, like I said, I used to have the TMJ, like, for example, honestly, I actually wish I could eat more steak. I can eat steak, but eating steak feels like a chore to me.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. It's like the chewing and the cheeks and just the jaw there. And so like I can see like, yeah, I have a little tightness here. And I know certainly when I go to LA this summer, I'm gonna be booking an appointment with you to get some work done here. So maybe that's a good segue because I know we don't have too much time left. But so what do you do? So I know you literally will do work inside someone's mouth,
Yes.
right? So I think I'm sure I'm not the only one that has some sort of tightness in their face, their jaw, different parts. And so what do you do? What's going on? You get in there and loosen things up?
Yeah. And so look me up when you come out. I'm in Santa Barbara, but I work often in LA, like once a week and then once a month further in LA proper. So definitely. And I go up to the Bay Area, like next week I'll work a few days up there and see patients there. So anybody else who's like, hey, I have a lot of people who fly in and they're like, I want to fly into LA and let's get some sessions in. I do a lot of intensives where people, I had a few people come out recently. One guy, we did 9 hours of body work over 2 days. So 3 3-hour sessions and then 1 hour movement at the beach to help him rewire his movement patterns, do a little meditation, a little mapping, a little mindfulness practice to help tune into his life goals. So that is really fun. And that's called my embryology intensives. And I love those. But there are a lot of people who, have been working in the mouth, body workers who've been working in the mouth for decades and even intranasally, people working intranasally for a long time. But so I kind of am again like coming into a time where people are doing this, and I love so many body workers out there. But so I'll explore that, working in the mouth, working intranasally, working on the cranial bones, and gently loosening, when there's facial bone tightness and misalignments, and working on all the organs of the body, working. So when I think there's a big, huge shift when you work in the mouth and you work on the body, and you see what changes when you do that. That's where I developed my floor of the mouth protocol, where I just have this back and forth of working on all these areas, and I'd say, like, once we can identify what is at the root of your mouth tension, is it your right kidney, is it your thyroid gland, and or is it your esophagus? I know I can work on all these areas and see layers change in the mouth, and then at that point we have the whole body go into this loosening and just fluid movement. And so my embryology system is a 9 series where it's built on like 9 sessions to go through the body exhaustively. Like I said, though, with my intensive, I go through all 9 of those series in 3 sessions. So it's 3 hours each to go through all 9. And some people come in and they're like, I just want to do a 2-hour session. I'm like, awesome. Or they want to do a bunch of those. It doesn't have to be in my series. It's just I work on all the bones, all the muscles, all the fascia. And, if I didn't mention the organs, and then I work on the sensory system, the lymph system, in finding out, like somebody in here today, she was on the table, and was working on, her left side, and it was so tense, and it was in bringing up an experience she had with a teacher before, where that teacher got really upset that she knew something that the teacher didn't know, that triggered the teacher when she brought it up and said how that was a kind of a difficult moment. Like, all of a sudden her fascia on her left side of her abdomen loosened, and her intercostal muscles loosened, and her left shoulder got way freer. So bringing up a dialogue while we're working with people is sometimes a game changer. And it's not therapy, it's not counseling, and it verges on somatic therapy. But I love to blend basically like so many fields while I'm working with somebody to see what's actually at the root here. What's going to change what's going on in your body? How can I bring you relief so that we can help you? Because most people don't come in thinking, I need my tongue loosened. That's not why they're here. They're there because of TMJ. They're there because they come in because they have like all this, like, headache pain, and somebody told them it might be from their tongue. And so I just try to look at, why do they actually come in the first place? What's really their pain point? How can I help with that? Because it's less about making something happen than it is about bringing people relief, and that kind of freedom from that kind of pain can leave them more able to like just be present and happy with their lives, which is what I love.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We always say a healthy person has 1,000 wishes, but a sick person has only one.
Yeah, so true.
This has been absolutely amazing. Dr. Neel, you have online courses for, I think, practitioners and for just regular people?
Yeah, totally. I have floor of the mouth interconnectivity unveiled for practitioners, any healer, anybody looking to understand my paradigm for the floor of the mouth. And that's 6 modules, 90 minutes each. And I give people my airway map as part of that. They also get tongue press for free. Tongue press is my mini course for anybody with a tongue. So that's for anybody who just wants to know some of the things that I showed you today, and plus a lot more, and videos and audio and PDF, and how to understand how they can find keys. And, that's bite sized and easy for a lot of people to get. And then also, I am about to come out with a new one, and it's called the floor 4, and it's about the 4 areas in the body. If you free these up, the floor of the mouth will drop in its tension, and it will make unmistakable change in your body. So I'm excited. I'll be doing a webinar, a free webinar to talk about that soon. And then the last thing that I'm kind of up to, there's a lot that I'm up to. It's crazy sometimes, but I'm traveling to teach my floor of the mouth protocol to all body workers, all healers, even some dentists come, and I'm teaching it in LA. So there's one on May 17th, May 24th. There's just ones upcoming, but then I'm in Phoenix in mid-June teaching. And then I'll be in Boise, Idaho in mid-July. And then I'll be in Chicago towards the end of August. And likely September, will be in the Minneapolis area. So I'll be teaching this protocol. It's on my Floor of the Mouth tour, where I'm touring it now, getting as many people trained in this. And I would say there's a lot of amazing healers out there that are like, people will say like, oh, I have my so many people now are becoming aware of like, we need body work, right? We need the physical therapy, the osteopath, the craniosacral therapy, the craniosacral fascial therapy, the chiropractor. I'm kind of like those all smashed into one. And so some of my favorite students are rolfers, deep tissue structural integration specialists who know how to change the body's patterns, and osteopaths. And anyways, I have so many people that I get the privilege of teaching that I honestly think like they're so amazing in what they do. But my protocol is like, I don't know, it is this biohack. It is this way into a system to create change that for me came because I needed to help my daughter. And then that translated into trying to help all the people who came in and finding out why we couldn't really get change, and identifying some of these root cause issues has led to a lot more satisfaction. But I'll say one more thing too about that is like, my favorite thing is when people don't need me. My favorite thing is when people are used to going and getting adjusted 1, 2, 3 times a week. And when they come into me and we solve like some of the deeper issues, and they don't even need that frequency, and maybe they need once a month. But I'm kind of really a big fan of how can I reduce people's dependency on me and what we do as body workers, so that they can have practices to help their own bodies. And that's why I created Tongue Press, so that people can do a lot without ever having to come to me or others. But, that being said, we're here. I do virtual visits, and I want to help people problem solve things so it's way quicker and so way less pain. And sometimes these problems are complicated and they need the help of an expert. So I'm here for that for sure.
Amazing, man. This is really good stuff. So I want to get your mini course. I want to check out the free webinar. Where can people get all this stuff and follow you and learn more?
Yeah, I mean, mainly, if you Google Floor of the Mouth, like you'll see my name. But my Instagram is Dr. Neel Bulchandani, and my website is neelbulchandani.com. And if you Google Tongue Press, you'll see it too. So my Instagram is the place, and Facebook where I'm most active, and I'm posting about my events and my ongoings. And then also it's all on my website, as well.
Amazing. Yeah. And I'll spell that for people. We'll link to it too, but just some people who are listening here. So the website, Neel is spelled Neel. Bulchandani is BulchandaniDani.com. So yeah, we'll link to it as well in the show notes and everything. But Dr. Neel, this has been amazing. I'm really fascinated by this stuff. I have this feeling I need some of this work too. So I'm certainly going to check you out and see when I can come see you in California myself. But this has been really eye-opening. Really appreciate all that you do. I'm going to check out your mini course and your webinars and stuff, and highly recommend others that are listening now do the same. And thanks for being a wealth of knowledge and for teaching other healers how to do this important work as well, man. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm happy to have you here. So I'm looking forward to your visit. And then, I'm so excited. And I'm so thankful for the opportunity to be with you, hang out, have a great conversation, and to share this knowledge as much as I can. So I really appreciate you, and you're an awesome host and a great conversationalist. So thanks so much.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, can you please leave us a rating or review and subscribe? I've realized that while we have actually increased our downloads a lot, we're actually getting a lot of downloads, which I'm really happy about. We actually have very few ratings. And I realized that I've never asked people really to rate much. So I'm asking you now if you could please rate and review and subscribe. And if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to anyone that you think will get value out of this. Also, if you haven't checked out our line of products at buypeakperformance.com, you get 20% off your first order. That's www.buypeakperformance.com. We have some incredible products, including our organic high-altitude coffee. If you don't know this, coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed with pesticides out of any crop. So it's really important that you drink organic coffee. We've gone above and beyond to source what we believe is the highest quality and healthiest organic coffee in the world. We're also famous for our organic green superfood powder. You can get 20% off of that as well at buypeakperformance.com. We also have an organic, vegan, and paleo plant protein. See, most of the vegan proteins out there are using brown rice protein, which is really not a good source of protein, and it's also a grain. And if you're paleo, you know that grains tend to cause inflammation in some cases for some people. And so we wanted to make one that was paleo friendly and vegan and organic. We made an amazing amino acid profile, so it's really one of the best plant proteins for muscle building. So you can check out Peak Performance Organic Plant Protein. You can find that on our website. Of course, all our products are on Amazon as well. So thanks again. And again, please, if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to someone who you feel can get value out of it. And please leave us a rating, review, and subscribe. Thank you.